We at Home Helpers are very happy to introduce a friend of ours today. Samantha Jefferson is the Executive Director of CrossRoads Hospice and Palliative Care. Now, she's using her many years of management experience with sales, marketing, and customer relations as she runs this fine company. She's known as hardworking, driven, and dedicated, and especially with the 4 Ps: professional processes, practices, and protocols. Didn't know that one, did you? She's very good in organizational skills, as she must be to run such a facility, and an expert in communications and people skills and running the largest hospice provider in the area. Wow. So we're very honored to have Samantha Jefferson as our guest this morning. Samantha.
Well, thank you, Tom, for that very nice introduction. I'd like for you to pass that on to my boss. Anyway, as Tom said, I am Samantha Jefferson, and I'm with CrossRoads Hospice, and I have had the honor to be with CrossRoads for a little over 10 years now. Just to tell you kind of how I started about in hospice, because people ask, how in the world did you get in hospice? And I think it just happened. I was in pharmaceutical sales for several years and traveled across the South. Did a lot of traveling because I worked for mainly private companies. My father-in-law had an experience in hospice the last 2 weeks of his life. He was in a hospice house, is what we call them. And I was just really able to witness and to really see firsthand how hospice was more of a ministry, in particular to our family. It really gave us some time to say goodbye, to kind of wrap up some loose ends, as far as his financial standing, and us to really make the last 2 weeks of his life really a quality time. So I've heard about a job at CrossRoads and thought, I just really want to be a part of that. I really want to be a part of making a difference in somebody's life, because the dermatology products that I was representing were great, but at the end of the day, I can't really say it was that life-changing. And I felt like I was really led to CrossRoads and was blessed to have that opportunity. In my 6 years out in the field with CrossRoads, I had the opportunity to call on assisted livings, like Ave Maria, nursing homes, physicians, hospitals, discharge planners, and kind of really get a feel for what the need was out there, and really get an idea that there's so much more about hospice that we really don't even know, and that folks were forced into this decision, usually during a crisis time, when their loved one is maybe in the hospital, suffering from some sort of illness that they're not going to be able to recover from. And physicians had really not talked about hospice before. It was presented to them at the really last minute. So our goal at CrossRoads is to try to educate as many people as we can, whether that be in the community, in the medical community, to give folks that knowledge, because if you've got knowledge, that arms you with better decision-making skills. So that's kind of what we're all about in the community. So I have a slide presentation, and I'm not going to necessarily maybe stick to it. I'm going to highlight, because we can all read. But
Tim is in control. Just let him know what you want to do.
Okay, thanks. And y'all bear with me. This is the first time I've ever done this, but my husband said I have no problem talking for 25 minutes. Or my staff at work. But anyway, hospice, the technical diagnosis of hospice is a terminal diagnosis with 6 months or less to live, okay? Now, we don't have a crystal ball, but that's an ideal look at what hospice is. Hospice, we don't prolong life, and we don't hasten death. Our goal is to make that a quality time instead of a quantity time. So we want our patient's life to be exactly what they want it to be. And I'll get into that because we've got a couple of special programs that I'll talk to you a little bit about. A lot of times folks don't know what to look for in hospice, like a hospice patient. What's a hospice patient look like? And we see all types of hospice patients. And hospice could be a cancer patient who has chosen not to pursue any more aggressive treatment. Chemo might be something that their body just won't tolerate. And so they've chosen to forego that aggressive treatment, no more chemo, no more hospital visits, just I want to be comfortable in my home, whether that be in a nursing home, assisted living, wherever that patient might call home. And we want to just do what we can to help them get through this last stage of their life.
Taylor, do you have the control or does Tim have it?
Tim does.
Okay, just let Tim go.
Okay, Tim. Next slide, pretty please. Thank you. Hospice is about providing choices to the patient and their family. We provide a holistic plan of care that includes the physician and the interdisciplinary team. The interdisciplinary team is going to include a nurse, a CNA, a social worker, and a chaplain, and then a bereavement counselor. And so the bereavement counselors usually come in towards the end of the patient's life and is with that family for 13 months post-death. So gives that family some support and kind of helps them walk through their own journey of the grief process, because we know that's different in every situation. The hospice patient still can remain a full code. So I think back in the day, you had to be a DNR. That's not the case now. So you can come on board. Of course, the goal is to move that patient to a DNR because resuscitation is not what it is on TV. Okay, it's very painful. It's very traumatic for the patient. So we kind of lay that process out. Obviously, it's the patient's choice, but we want them to know realistically, the family and the patient, exactly what that looks like. We want that patient to die with dignity. That's the most important thing to us. That patient, as long as they can, participate in their management and care and let them remain in the environment of their choice. And that means a lot of patients want to stay home. Some patients want to, and we do this all the time, we transfer them to a hospice house because they don't want to die at home. But it's allowing that patient to choose exactly how they want to live and how they want to die. Okay, next slide. And I've talked about this a little bit already. A patient with a terminal illness has been given a prognosis of 6 months or less. I'm sorry, I can't just ignore the camera. A patient wants to seek comfort care instead of curative care. Hospice is a Medicare, a Medicaid benefit. We don't ever bill a patient for hospice. We do take unfunded patients. Most commercial insurances have a clause for hospice care as well. And we, like I said, we don't refuse care for anybody because of lack of insurance. Yes?
Have you ever had patients outlive the 6 months or actually get better?
Absolutely. That is a great question. Yes, we have. A lot of times patients, and we've had them live for 2 years. Medicare requires, our criteria for keeping a patient is they have to show a decline. So as long as hospice can show a decline, but there are times when we say, oh my gosh, Miss Smith is doing great. You know, she's gotten our one-on-one care, or somebody's feeding her. She's gotten a little bit more social and she's doing great. So we may have to discharge her. Now, obviously we're gonna see her back. We're gonna see her back at some point. But absolutely, people graduate from hospice, you know, for periods of time. Absolutely. So it corrects another misnomer is, you know, you're absolutely dying tomorrow, you know, if you go on hospice. Not the case. Okay, so next slide. This is just how you can notify Crossroads if you have any, or any hospice company. Like I said, we're in every nursing home, assisted living in Shelby, Fayette, and Tipton County. And we have someone answering our phones all the time that can help answer questions. I'll give you my information at the end of my presentation, and you're always welcome to call me, email me with any questions that you might have. Okay, next slide. I keep looking at you because I'm thinking. Okay. And again, we just offer a safe, coordinated care program of palliative and hospice services from the time of admission through the bereavement and the caregivers after death. We provide care to all terminally ill and their families, regardless of race, creed, color, religion, national origin, gender, disability, marital status, disease process, or sexual orientation. We believe that everyone deserves hospice at the end of life. And sometimes this is challenging if there's language barriers. We do have a Spanish-speaking nurse who has been great, but we see language barriers, cultural differences. So we really work hard to make sure that we are tailoring our care to the patient's needs and their wishes. So that's something that's really important to us. And even though it might not be the standard, we're going to make sure that we abide by their wishes. Okay, next slide. Level of care. We see patients in their private residences, assisted livings, long-term care. We provide what's known as routine visits. That's our weekly visits made by a nurse and a CNA, chaplain and social workers. We see those patients, or those patients are seen once a month. Some patients opt out of a social worker, but I found that social workers really can help with so many different needs within the family. It's just another set of eyes that can really help coordinate things that you would never even know. I call them this, they are just sometimes miracle workers. So that's very important. Next slide. Respite care. Every patient is entitled to a respite care, which is 5 days in a contracted facility. It gives their loved one, their caregiver, a little break. Because we know that it's when caring for a loved one in the home, or if that patient's in a nursing home somewhere, it's really tough on the caregiver because they've got a life going on. A lot of times, you know, small children, jobs, you know, spouses. So this kind of gives them a little bit of a break, maybe a chance to go out of town. But I think that's a really nice advantage for that. So I said patients could go into a skilled facility and they're going to receive a nursing and a CNA visit daily. So, okay, next slide. We also have what we call GIP, which is general inpatient. We have relationships with St. Francis Memphis, St. Francis Bartlett, and Methodist University Hospital. If you have a loved one whose symptoms are out of control and we've done everything we can, we have an option to place that patient in the hospital under our care so that we can monitor those symptoms and get those under control so we can get that patient back home. I'll tell you, that doesn't happen really very often because we are so on top of those signs and symptoms and side effects that rarely do we have a situation where we can't control it from the home. So, but this is an option. We see a lot of patients that are not able to go home, that we admit at the hospital, because for one reason or other, they're not going to make it home. So it allows us to come in and provide that support to the family, opens up that door for the bereavement services after. So that's another way we can serve. Okay, next slide. Continuous care is, this is a little bit tricky, but it allows us to come in and take care of a patient in the last 24 hours of their life. When that family really needs some support, we really need some symptoms managed, we have a nurse there the last 24 hours. And like I said before, there's no crystal ball in determining when absolutely someone's going to take their last breath, but our trained nurses are really, really good about recognizing those signs and the last stages. Okay, next slide. We do what we call a watch status, and if our nurses feel like patients are really, really closing in and death is imminent within the next 48 hours, we're going to put that patient on what we call a watch, and we're going to go visit that patient every shift turn. So that just allows us to keep, eyes and ears and make a check on the family. It's more than about the patient to us. It's the whole family unit. Okay, next slide. Even more care, it's almost runs parallel with the continuous care. We just got our team in there with patients, with the families, trying to help them recognize what's going on. They have a hard time understanding, why is mom not eating? Why is she not awake? Why is she not, drinking anything? Just kind of trying to help hold their hand through this, because it's a very, very scary time. And so, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I just had a question.
Yeah.
How does, when you have your nurses and your critical care folks, how do mentally handle that when they face that, sadness on a regular basis? How do you handle the personnel there at your area, keep them mentally sharp and at the same time in a positive mood?
That is a very good question, and I ask myself, I don't know how they do it. I feel like hospice is so specialized, it's almost a calling, it's a ministry. Because I don't know many people that wake up and say, oh, I want to be a hospice nurse, because it's not. I mean, it is very overwhelming, because they're not only carrying, they're not just carrying one family. Right now, I'm sure y'all are aware, we've got a huge shortage in nursing, a real big nurses shortage. And so our nurses are carrying as many as 15 to 20 patients. So, and there's family dynamics, in each. The team, that's where we kind of use our team approach. But obviously these people get attached to their families. And we try to encourage, we have a very generous PLT program with a personal leave time. So we encourage them to take those days off, have a healthy mixture of work-home life. We are very supportive of each other. Sometimes nurses and CNAs get attached to some patients more than others. And so it's a continual, work in progress, trying to find that healthy balance. But our hospice nurses that we have longevity, and they manage to take care of themselves. And we tell them, you got to take care of your own mental health before you can do this, because there is a lot of sadness. Every day we've got chaplains on staff, so support groups. So we really try to nurture their mental health, because we know how important that is.
Well said, thank you.
Well, thank you. Okay. A member of our care team, if we feel like the patient is actively dying, we're gonna sit with that family. That family may not want us in the room. They may not want us in the house. We can sit out in the car, just say, hey, I'm here if you need us. we're gonna be here. After the patient passes, we're gonna call the funeral home, we're gonna sit, we're gonna just hold their hand throughout the whole process. Okay, next slide. This is just talking about our physician. When you come on board with hospice, you usually have a primary care physician that's going to refer you to hospice, and you can choose to continue to collaborate with that physician, or you can choose a medical director of the hospice. Usually most patients pick our medical directors who are used to managing those types of situations and using the drugs that we use on hospice. They're comfortable with the levels of pain medication. So, which is something else I kind of want to touch on. Some people think that when hospice comes in, that all of a sudden that you're just gonna knock that patient out, and that's not the case. Our goal is not to just totally knock them out. Our goal is to treat their pain as it applies to them, and not totally keep them knocked out, because like I said, we want them to have the best quality of life they can. Sometimes pain, absolutely gets unbearable, and we treat that as needed. So, okay, next slide. Spiritual care, like I said, there's chaplains, and in these interdisciplinary groups, this is not unique to Crossroads. This is with any hospice. So any hospice is made up of those team members of the interdisciplinary team, like I said before, a chaplain, a social worker, a nurse, and a CNA. So chaplain, I can't tell you how many times that families that weren't really spiritual, that a chaplain was able to go and say a prayer, and it's a calming and peaceful transition, and the families are very appreciative of that. So our chaplains are there to support patients and families. Okay, next slide. And social worker, like I said, I feel like social workers are angels. They are working behind the scenes to organize respites. If we are trying to make arrangements for somebody's daughter, to come in, we're trying to help all those things happen to allow that patient to have the peace. We have sometimes patients that are just hanging on for days, and we're saying, is there someone you need to say goodbye to? Is there a fence you want to kind of try to mend? So we try to make those things come together as the patient wishes. All right, next. Bereavement Services, talked a little bit about this. Medicare requires that we provide bereavement services for up to 13 months after a death. So that is a Medicare requirement, but it's nice to know that those bereavement services are there in place to help start with the healing process, as well as to cope with that death. Okay, next. Volunteer. I thought this was really interesting, because this was something I learned, that 5% of all the hours that any hospice bills has to be volunteers. So we could not have a hospice without our volunteers. So we have volunteers that volunteer in all different capacities. I mean, it may be baking a cake for a patient's birthday. It might be stuffing envelopes. So we are very thankful in Memphis to have a great team of volunteers. So we really appreciate them. Next slide. I talked a little bit about this. We can kind of skip that. Next slide. This is talking about Medicare benefit periods of hospice. When you first go on hospice, you're in your first 90 days. So somebody asked the question, could you graduate from hospice? Mm-hmm. So at any time after that first initial 90 days, you're not getting sicker, you're getting better. then we would discharge you at that point. So that's kind of getting into the really, really technical billing side of hospice. That's something you probably, you may never see. Okay, next slide. This just talks about examples of submitted admitting diagnoses: cancer, heart disease, pulmonary disease, end-stage Alzheimer's, renal failure, such and so on. Next slide. And again, that's the same slide. Next slide. Hospice criteria: poor appetite, weight loss, decreased mental status, skin breakdown. Most of the patients that we see are appropriate for hospice are pretty textbook in one of these diagnoses. So next slide. This is unique to Crossroads in that one of our mottos is we do more. And one of the things that we do for our patients is we celebrate life. We celebrate anniversaries, birthdays. We have a program called our GOAD program, and it's a gift of a day. So in other words, I might say, Tom, what does your favorite day look like? And to everybody, it means something different. We've taken somebody most recently on a boat ride downtown with their family, and he was a fireman, so he wanted to go by the fire station. So we did a tour of the fire station. We've done a helicopter ride. We've taken people fishing. It's just a fun way for us to say, hey, you've gotten this really bad diagnosis, but there's still some fun left to be had in life, and there's still some life to enjoy. So it just gives us that opportunity to really, delve into that patient's life and find out what was fun to them or what's fun to them. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
I just wanted to share, in 2018, I lost my mother, and I did get to see her several times that last year. But when at the moment, or right before her passing, the hospice person told my sister to call me and give me a chance to say goodbye. And I'm forever grateful for that.
Mhm.
That short little period of time before she passed.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think my sister, I would have thought of that. That was a hospice recommendation.
Right. Well, that is, going back to the patients that, may be hanging on for some reason and you don't know where their energy is coming from. A lot of times they're waiting on, a son, a daughter to come in and just get that one last. And I do think that's huge. And when you're in that moment, you may not necessarily think about that. So I'm glad that nurse shared that and you had that opportunity.
I forgot to mention, I was 750 miles away, so there wasn't any hopping in a car and giving one last.
Right. And I don't think there's any worse feeling than you're here, but you need to be here. But at least you were able to, to voice that over the phone. Yeah, that does. It's the little things like that are just become huge, So anybody else have any questions?
This guy thumbs up.
Yeah, this man had been a helicopter pilot and he wanted to go on a helicopter ride, so we did that.
It's almost like Make-A-Wish for grown-ups.
It really is. It is kind of
Did he
like,
land that helicopter?
well, no, that I don't know. I know I could land it, but like I said, it really gives these patients a chance to really live out their last days and make those days quality. So
Samantha, you referred to several different scenarios through your presentation: weekly, monthly. Is there a set kind of a schedule, or is it all customized based on the family's needs?
it's pretty much customized on the patient's needs. Now, Medicare says that we are required to do one nursing visit every 2 weeks. Okay, so that's saying that patient one time every 14 days. During COVID, that has changed the whole world. we have been given a grace period of, we can see the patient once every 21 days. Now, Crossroads standards are a nursing visit twice a week. With COVID and with our nursing shortage, and I know Ave Maria has seen, we've had shutdowns in facilities, which has been quite, challenging trying to get in there and see those patients. But right now, I can answer it, but it changes every day. So as we can get in, our goal is to do the most care that we absolutely can. But it is tailored according to right now COVID, according to that patient. A patient may have 2 visits a week, but over the weekend, a caregiver may be having a crisis. And so who do they call? They're going to call us because we're going to answer the phone and they're going to say, my mom had a fall, or she's not drinking anything, she's not eating anything. I need you to come out and take a look. And that's what we're there for.
Well, I can tell you too, just a quick story. I lost my father 28 years ago to cancer, and I'm one of 6 siblings, and they were all there except me, who lived 1,000 miles away.
Right.
So even with that strong family support group around them, hospice played a critical role in helping that transition, and made me feel much more comfortable because I couldn't be there until the end, after the end. But anyway, just a compliment on your services, and I do see how it is a calling and is a ministry. Because it's just not for them. Much like our caregivers as well, not quite as extreme as yours, but it's not a job.
Right. No, it's not. It truly is.
And no one gets rich doing it. And if you're not good at it, you won't do it very well, and you won't do it very long. Right.
Well, and there has never been a time that tells me that even more than right now, because we have such loyalty and we have long-term staff. And right now, what they're offering these nurses and these CNAs to travel or to go to the hospital setting, our staff is just committed. They want to be in hospice. They really want to be in hospice. If I could offer any advice to anybody that's got parents or loved ones that are aging, or even us as we all age, is to be informed. Educate yourself on this service before you need it, and know what it is, know what your rights are, know how it can help you in situations. Now, sometimes we don't get a chance to, provide hospice for a patient for one reason or another. But I had a gentleman call me the other day, and he said, my wife and I are just sitting here talking, and we are talking about hospice and what, kind of what that means. And we want to give our children some assurance and some instructions on how we see the end of our life, living out. And we want to give them that. And really and truly, it is a gift that we can provide our families to let them know, when I get to that point, these are my wishes. It's not something that anybody wants to talk about by any means, but it allows you to be able to prepare, whether that be financially or mentally or emotionally. It just gives that family and that children the gift of not having to make that decision. So, yes, ma'am.
To piggyback on that, my daughter lost her husband when he was 35, and he died of cancer. And over a 6-month period, very quickly for a young, healthy person. And I sat with her at the funeral parlor, and every question they asked her was so painful. So the one thing you could do for your loved one is to write it down. Say, this is what I want for my funeral songs. This is the kind of service I want, so that poor person doesn't have to sit there and lament every single question. What would have he have wanted?
That's right. And when everybody's in crisis mode, is not a time you want to be making those choices. So absolutely, nobody has to talk about it or read it, say, I'm writing it down. I've done a living will. Here it is when you need it. Is that my buzzer? I could talk 25 minutes. So anyway, I am always available for questions. You can send me an email. My office number is 901-382-9292. I'm happy to answer any questions I can. If you ask me a question and I don't know, I promise I'll get you an answer. So, and we're happy. We thank you so much for having me.